Good morning, everyone. I, Avleen Kaur Kohli of PGDM first year, on behalf of the management, faculty, and the students of IMT Hyderabad, extend a hearty welcome to one and all present here. We welcome you all to the distinguished speaker series as a part of Abhyuday 2024. Today, we have the privilege to host a very special guest, Dr. Duvvuri Subbarao, whose esteemed presence has indeed glorified the event and added a vibrancy to our orientation program. Dr. Duvvuri Subbarao served as the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India for 5 years. Prior to that, he was the Finance Secretary to the Government of India and the Secretary to the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. After topping civil services examination in 1972, Dr. Subbarao joined the Indian Administrative Services. In a career spanning over 3 decades, he held various positions at the state level in the government of Andhra Pradesh and the central level in the Government of India. He was also a lead economist in the World Bank for 5 years.
Dr. Subbarao holds a master's degree in physics from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. He studied economics at the Ohio State University and later at MIT. He has a PhD in economics from Andhra University. He was a visiting fellow, first at the National University of Singapore and later at the University of Pennsylvania. He is currently serving as a visiting faculty at the Kautilya School of Public Policy, Hyderabad, and at Yale University, USA. With that being said, I would now like to welcome Dr. Subbarao to grace the audience with his initial remarks before we move on to the fireside chat with the moderator, Professor Nikhil Rastogi.
Good morning. And congratulations to all of you for getting through a very tough competitive examination and getting admission into one of the premier management schools in the country. So over the next 2 years, you can look forward to high quality education, not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom. That will prepare you not just for a career, but for your entire life. Your director, Professor Shriyasha Reddy, told me that you're a very talented bunch, drawn from across the country. And I then thought, what should I tell you when you're embarking on such a valuable journey? So I thought I'd tell you some stories. Okay, that's all I can tell you. The first story is this, that you're all thinking, after this wonderful introduction these two ladies have given about me, what is this guy going to tell us? He was Finance Secretary to the Government of India, he was Governor to RBI. What made him tick? You're forming a first impression about me. That's what we all naturally do. When we see a person, instinctively, we try to form an impression of that person. Around that, I want to tell you my own experience. When I went for the IAS interview in 1972, more than 50 years ago, okay, I was then a student at IIT Kanpur. My interview was in Delhi in UPSC in the first week of March, first slot in the morning at 9 o'clock. I took an overnight train from Kanpur to Delhi. I arrived in Delhi by about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. I went to my friend's house, changed, showered, pressed my new suit, wore that. My friend's mother gave me breakfast. I was ready by 8 o'clock. I had to go to UPSC. Normally I used to go around in Delhi all the time by a bus. But because this was a special occasion, I was going to UPSC, I thought I'd take an auto rickshaw that day because I was wearing a new suit. But my father kept writing to me letters saying that no, you take a taxi. Because he was very concerned that I should arrive in UPSC in good shape. So I took a taxi. For the first time in my life, I was wearing a suit, sitting in a taxi. I went to UPSC in good time. By about 9:05 or 9:10, I was in front of the committee. Good morning, sir, good morning, sir. There were no madams at that time. Good morning, sir, all around. And then the chairman said, are you still at IIT Kanpur? I said, yes, sir. When did you come to Delhi this morning, sir? When are you going back? This evening, sir. When will you finish in Kanpur? In another couple of months. After that that lasted about half a minute, and then he looked at one of the members, and the member said, "Do you read newspapers, Mr. Subbarao?" "Yes, sir." "Which newspaper?" "I read the Statesman, sir." "So did you read today's newspaper?" I was flustered, because I hadn't read that morning's newspaper. And then the chairman told the member, "Look, he came all the way from Kanpur, he was preparing for this interview, he wouldn't have had time. Did you read today's newspaper?" I'm talking about Delhi 50 years ago, 9 o'clock in the morning in the first week of March, when it was still dark and damp. Okay? "So did you read today's newspaper?" Member smiled and said, "Okay, tell me, did you read yesterday's newspaper?" "Yes, sir." "What was the picture on the front page of Statesman yesterday?" These days, if I look at a newspaper, I forget what I've seen in 10 seconds. But since I was much younger at that time, like all of you, I remembered. So I said, "Sir, it's a picture of Muslims celebrating Muharram." "Celebrating? Is Muslim a festival to celebrate?" In 1 minute, in the first 1 minute of my interview, I was flustered for a second time. Then he said, "Muharram is not a festival. Muharram is an occasion for mourning the grandson of the Prophet who was martyred." Then he said, "You lived in Kanpur for 2 years. Kanpur has a predominant Muslim population. Don't you know this?" In any other occasion, I would have been defensive. No, I would have said, no, sir. Kanpur IIT campus is very far away from the city. We don't get to mingle with the city, etc. But I was so flustered that I couldn't even be defensive. I was tongue-tied. Then he said, "Which sect of Muslims observes Muharram?" Then the chairman said, "He doesn't even know what Muharram is. Why do you ask him all this?" So in the first 1.5 minutes of my interview, it completely dissolved. I was setting so much store of scoring such high marks in the interview, that interview completely dissolved in front of me. I was flustered, angry, annoyed, bewildered, anxious. But then I thought the members, they'd formed an impression of me. Now they'd go through the motions, and about 15-20 minutes, they would go through the routine of charade of interviewing me and let me go. But in the event, the interview went on for about 35-40 minutes, and the quality of the interview went from one lower level to another higher level all through the 35 minutes. We talked about center-state relations, we talked about President Nixon's China visit, we talked about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, about existentialism, etc. So, by the time my interview ended, the interview committee must have had a very high impression of me, because that year I went on to score the second highest marks in the interview in the UPSC at that time. The moral of that story is that first impressions are always misleading. Okay? So I thought I'd tell you a few other things that I learned over my long career from my experience, some lessons I learned which might be useful for you as you embark on your own journeys. Okay? One of the things I learned is that whatever you have to do it with passion. If you read self-help books like Jonathan Livingston Seagull or The Alchemist, or if you go to a leadership seminar, what do they tell you? They tell you the secret to success in life is to discover your passion and pursue it, right? The secret to success in life is to discover your passion and pursue it. I found from my own long experience that that is not very practical. Life does not often give you the opportunity to pursue your passion. The lesson I learned is that whatever you have to do it with passion. That's what I learned. I'll tell you how I learned this lesson. We used to have a chief minister here in the combined state of Andhra Pradesh called NTR. How many of you heard of NTR? He was chief minister in the early to mid 1980s here. NTR was a teetotaler. Not only was he a teetotaler, but he had a moral contempt for people who drank. So when he came into office for the first time, he was appalled. He was pained by the thousands of people who were dying because they were drinking adulterated liquor, like what's happening in Tamil Nadu today. You know, over the last 1 week, we're hearing about the Hooch tragedy in Tamil Nadu. So thousands of people used to die in Andhra Pradesh. So he wanted to impose total prohibition. But the finance department people said that, sir, you cannot impose prohibition because excise is a very big source of revenue for us. By selling liquor, the government makes money because we collect tax on that. If we forego, if we sacrifice that revenue, we cannot implement all the other flagship schemes that you thought of, like giving people rice at rupees 2 per kg, etc. So NTR, he didn't like that advice, but he acquiesced in that. He said, if I can't impose prohibition, I will at least make sure that people don't drink adulterated liquor and die. So the solution was that the government would set up liquor bottling plants in every district of the state, so that when people buy liquor, they know that it is bottled in a government bottling plant. They don't drink adulterated liquor. Okay? So they decided that, and they appointed me as the officer on special duty for arak bottling. Now, I said, my first reaction was, why me? There are 250 IAS officers in the state. Why did they pick on me? I did not show any flair for a project like that. I did not show any flair, much less for bottling liquor. And then, it was a no-end project. It had to be done in 9 months. A bottling plant in every district of the state in 9 months. It was a no-go. So I said I was being set up for failure. And then what do? You see the IAS toppers being interviewed in the newspaper. When they interviewed, why do you want to join the IAS? What do they say? I joined the IAS because I want to change the world. And I'm bottling liquor to change the world? So if I go to a wedding or a family function, people say, what are you doing now? I'm bottling liquor. It's so embarrassing. Right? So I was angry, flustered, distraught, annoyed. I didn't know who to get angry with. So I went home and brewed it, but time was ticking. So after brooding for about 3-4 days, I said, if this is what I have to do, I will do it. It is better to try and fail than not trying at all. So I got together a team of people. We worked like in a war room, a project office. We planned and implemented the project, ready to go, ready to be commissioned 3 days before the deadline. Fully machined, fully staffed, all systems in place, just switch and the things will be on. So it was a very, very energetic experience for me. Because what I thought was an undoable job, unachievable thing, became achievable. What I thought would be a difficult, boring job became very enjoyable. And most importantly, it gave me such a sense of accomplishment and such self-confidence all through my life. I learned 3 lessons from that experience. The first lesson was that I should not be vain. I said, I'm too big, I'm the topper of the IAS, how can I do such a job as bottling liquor? But then I realized that you should not be vain about it. It's part of your career. The second thing I learned is that it is very important for us to be pushed out of our comfort zone. Left to ourselves, we want to be within our comfort zone. Many of you are probably coming out of your homes for the first time, right? So you come out of your comfort zone because at home you're familiar, you're predictable, etc. Being pushed out of your comfort zone can be an enormously valuable learning experience. As I said, if you are pushed out of your comfort zone, go and take it. You might fail, but there are lots of lessons to be learned from failure. Okay? It is the successful people are not people who've never failed, but people who've failed, but after having failed, got up, learned lessons, and moved on. And the third lesson I learned from that is that whatever you have to do it with passion. Okay? Let me tell you another story about another experience, leadership lesson or lesson of experience that I learned. I became governor of the Reserve Bank of India on the 5th of September 2008. Most of you must have been in primary school or early high school at that time, more than 15 years ago. 5th of September 2008 is a very, very significant date in the history of world finance. Not because I became governor of the Reserve Bank of India, but because of the tumultuous events that took place 2 weeks, over the 2 weeks after I became governor. 5th of September 2008, I became governor. 7th of September, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you heard of them? Two large housing mortgage companies in the US, they became bankrupt, they were taken over by the US government. 8th of September, countrywide, a large commercial bank in the US collapsed. 10th of September, AIG, the largest insurance company in the world, came to the brink of a meltdown. 12th of September, Merrill Lynch, one of the largest investment banks in the world, vanished. 14th of September, Washington Mutual and Wachovia, another two large commercial banks, came to the brink of a meltdown. 15th of September, Lehman Brothers collapsed. The collapse of Lehman Brothers on the 15th of September 2008 plunged the world into a very, very deep financial crisis, a devastating financial crisis. Global finance was plunged into near-death experience. Global economy went into a downturn not seen since the Great Depression. Governments, central banks, policymakers everywhere were bewildered, were anxious, were concerned. Markets were seized with fear and panic. Public everywhere were scared about where the money would go. So this storied institutions falling, culminating in the collapse of Lehman Brothers, that impact of the crisis ricocheted around the world and impacted every country. India was impacted too. You know, all our financial markets, our money markets, our currency market, bond market, equity markets, they went into a dizzy. Growth died, rupee became unstable. And in India, there was dismay, denial, disbelief about why we should be affected by the crisis. Because the narrative was that this crisis started because of some excesses by American and European banks, because the regulators were sleeping. So it's okay that they have a crisis, but here in India, our banks were well behaved, our regulators were vigilant, so why should we be affected by the crisis? So the story that they constructed was that the new governor came and he brought on the crisis. So wherever I go, people would go ask me, sir, when will the crisis be over? As if I knew. Nobody on the planet had an answer to that question. But since they said this, I would say, since you people say that the crisis would end when my term is over, the crisis will end when my term is over. And for good measure, I used to tell them, give them when my term would be over. Okay? But here's the thing. The week after my term ended, the week after I left the Reserve Bank of India, the crisis ended. Okay? Growth started going up, inflation started going down, the rupee stabilized, and the economic growth went on to a path of stability. Okay? So, over the next weeks and months, we did a number of things to manage the crisis. It was baptism by fire for me. Managing that crisis would have been a challenge even for an experienced governor. But for me as a greenhorn governor, it was a particularly difficult challenge. Partly because I was on a learning curve, but also because, this is the lesson I want to tell you, also because the markets did not have confidence in me. I had no credibility. Why did I have no credibility? Because I was Finance Secretary in Government of India in Delhi. They appointed me as the governor. So within 24 hours, I left the government, I left the IAS, flew to Mumbai, and I became the governor. As Finance Secretary, as a civil servant, I was an unknown quantity. Do you all know who the Finance Secretary to Government of India is? You don't know. Most of you don't know, right? But do you all know who the governor of RBI is? Right. The governor of RBI is a public figure. Okay? Finance Secretary is a civil servant. He's expected to be a backroom boy. So I was catapulted from being an unknown unknown to a known unknown. It is not appropriate, it is not correct that the governor is an unknown quantity, because the markets need to understand the governor, his style, his stance, his body language. That takes about 3 to 4 months, sometimes even 6 months. That time was denied to me. So around the markets, there was lack of confidence about whether this new governor came, he can manage the crisis. And I also had no credibility because the RBI is supposed to be an independent institution, as most of you know. My predecessor, Dr. Y.V. Reddy, established a formidable reputation for the independence of the RBI. There was the narrative in the markets, in the world, in the country, that the government appointed one of their own trusted civil servants so that he would go to the RBI and act according to their bidding. So I had no credibility. And in the crisis time, governments and central banks everywhere were acting in coordination, because one of the things you have to do during a crisis is to inspire confidence in the markets, in the public. And one of the ways of inspiring confidence is for the governments and regulators to be acting together. In normal times, RBI is independent, but during a crisis time, they have to act in coordination with the government. But if I was consulting the government, people would say, we told you this guy is going to take instructions from the government. So my credibility was eroded. And third, inflation was high until the crisis hit. My predecessor, Dr. Y.V. Reddy, was actually raising the interest rate in order to control inflation. But when the crisis hit, inflation died. So we had to change the Reserve Bank stance from tightening to easing. I was telling my staff that we must cut interest rates by 1 full percentage point. RBI never ever cut the interest rate by a full percentage point until then. And this is just 6 weeks after my predecessor had actually raised the interest rate. So I was asking the RBI to do a sudden policy stance shift. So again, people were nervous about whether this guy understands what he can do, what he's doing. So a number of circumstances conspired to rob me of the credibility required to do my job. One of the things you will realize when you get into jobs is that credibility is not given to you on a platter. You have to earn it. And earning that takes time. That time was denied to me. So it was a really challenging period. I had to earn my credibility, but what is heartening is that in the 100-day evaluation of my performance as the governor, and in the 1-year evaluation of my performance as the governor, the evaluation was fairly complimentary. Everybody said that I had done a good job under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. So one of the lessons I learned is that you have to earn your credibility. I've got lots of other lessons to say, but I will stop here. If you want me, I can carry on, but we'll start with the Q&A, and I want to talk to you people and listen to what you have to say. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I look forward to conversing with you.
We thank you for sharing your impeccable knowledge to the younger audience present here. We are indeed grateful. We now hand over the proceedings of the event to the moderator, Professor Nikhil Rastogi. Sir, you are requested to initiate the fireside chat with Dr. Duvvuri Subbarao.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful address. And a lot of questions that I prepared, you have already answered them. So what I'll do is I'll try to have some questions which are bringing to light some dilemmas that other authors have raised. So in this world, once this book has come, that Fooled by Randomness by Talib, now everyone says that, oh, you can't plan much, things are random, so don't take much credit for it anyways. So again, find in this book, same as ever, Morgan Housel says that important events are a result of few things going right? So, but if those things had not occurred, the event wouldn't have happened itself. So my question to you is, are there some points in your career you think are those defining moments which shaped your career?
That's a very searching question, Nikhil. But yeah, every new job, every new assignment has been a learning experience, has been a turning point. I've talked to you about my Arrack bottling experience. That was very unique. Not many IAS officers have that. Very few people in the world have an experience of building bottling plants for liquor. But I had also worked in Delhi, in Government of India, in the Ministry of Finance, when we did the Blitzkrieg reforms in 1991. In a month before many of you were born, perhaps, we had the 1991 economic reforms. You can't imagine the world before economic reforms. For those of you of your age, you don't understand the world before the economic reforms. I happened to be in the Ministry of Finance at that time. Just to give you a flavor of what the world was like at that time, if you went into a grocery shop, you had 3 brands of soap and 2 brands of shampoo to choose from. If you went abroad, you were given $20, just $20. People used to wait for years to get a landline telephone connection or an LPG cylinder. You had to book us, these days there are millions of motorcycles on the road. Those days we had to book a scooter and wait for years. And people used to give a booking receipt for a scooter as dowry because it would take so long. Okay? And the government was everything. Government used to make bread. The modern bread, I don't know if you heard of it. Government used to make bread and we used to take pride. When I went to Delhi and ate modern bread, I used to come and boast in Hyderabad that I ate modern bread. So that was the world before economic reforms. I happened to be in the Ministry of Finance in Delhi during 1991 when the Blitzkrieg reforms happened. So that was, I think, a great learning experience. I don't know about turning point. I went into the World Bank when I was about 45 years old. That was a great learning experience as well because it's one thing, I was finance secretary here in Andhra Pradesh doing hands-on job, but then when I went into the World Bank, I was advising other governments on how to do public finance management in countries in Africa, countries in East Asia, and in the Pacific, like Papua New Guinea. One of the things I learned from that experience is that even though our systems, our structures are all a function of our cultures, ultimately as human beings, we're all the same. Okay? A great learning experience for me. Then of course, I was in the RBI during the Lehman crisis that I spoke about. So many of these have been turning points, unexpected events that have been great learning experience. In real time, there were challenges, but when I look back now, they're happy experiences.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you have straddled different worlds. Now, the first one that I'll talk about is, see here, we have a lot of students who are from engineering and science background. Then we have a mix from commerce and other sciences backgrounds. You did your MSc in physics, and after that you became an administrator, then went on to do your economics. Now there's a popular quote about these two disciplines which says that 3% of laws in physical sciences explain 99% of the phenomena. Right? 3% explain the 99%. But in social sciences, 99% of the laws don't explain even 3% of the phenomena. Right? Some popular author, Dr. Derman, had said this. Now, you have straddled both the disciplines. Obviously, you didn't practice physics, but yeah, economics a lot. So, would you agree? And do you think the struggle of a social scientist is different from a physical scientist?
I do not know if the struggle is different, but I do know that social sciences are quite different from physical sciences. In fact, I've written, I gave a lecture at Indian Institute of Science some 12 years ago, exactly on this subject, why economics is not physics. Okay? Let's, instead of talking about social sciences and physical sciences, let's talk about economics and physics in concrete terms. Okay? Physics is an exact science. Economics is a social science. Laws of physics are immutable. They are the same across time, across space. Gravity is the same. Laws of economics are a function of human behavior. I cannot change the mass of an electron by my behavior. I can change the mass of a stock or a derivative by my behavior. In physical sciences, progressive knowledge happens from theory to practice and practice to theory. Take physics, for example. You heard of Michelson-Morley experiment? Michelson-Morley experiment in 1899, which discovered that the velocity of light is constant. They did an experiment and found that the velocity of light was constant, but they could not explain that. Einstein had to come, I think, in 1926. For about 25 years, they could not explain this. Einstein came and explained that. So we went from practice to theory, right? They discovered something in practice, and then they found a theoretical explanation for that. In physics, you can also find from theory to practice. You know the Higgs boson, the God particle, right? The God particle was predicted by theory, but for the last, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 years, they've not been able to find it. Sometime in 2012, they said it's actually discovered the God particle, the Higgs boson. So that is a transition from theory to practice. What I'm trying to tell you is that in physical sciences, progressive knowledge can be from practice to theory and theory to practice. In economics, progressive knowledge can only be one way, from practice to theory. No economist, no finance expert like Professor Nikhil can say, this is what my theory says, and this is how it must be. No, there is no such thing. You modify your theory depending on practice. There is no such thing that no equation that says that inflation next month will come down by 1 percentage point, a 0.1 percentage point. Okay? If inflation comes down by 0.1%, you say, okay, my model is correct. If it does not come down, you change your model. You don't say my finding is wrong. Okay? So in social sciences, progressive knowledge is from practice to theory. If something works in practice, they try to fit the theory into it.
Thank you, sir. The other area that you have straddled is between fiscal policy and monetary policy. Right? So when you were in public finance, you wanted to do something and maybe you were nudging RBI to do it. While at RBI, you are being nudged to do some things. So, and then you also talk about the challenges of making budgets. You say that, oh, revenue is constrained, expenditure is constrained, and borrowing is also constrained. So you are working with constraints. So my question is, what were the challenges in fiscal policy, and were they much more than monetary policy?
Yeah, what Professor Nikhil is referring to is the impossible trinity. Your expenditure, that has to go up. Your revenues cannot go up further. There's a limit on how much you can borrow. So how can you, it's an over-constrained problem. Those of you learned linear programming, you know that. It's an over-constrained problem. Okay? That is the impossible trinity of making budgets. We talked about fiscal and monetary policy. How many of you know the difference between fiscal and monetary policy? Okay, that's okay, very few. You will know. By the time you finish your education in IMT, you will be experts. in fiscal and monetary policy. But let me tell you, for the purpose of this response, that fiscal policy has to do with public finance and the taxation, expenditure management, debt management, etc. of the governments. Monetary policy has to do with the money supply, credit management, and inflation. Both monetary policy and fiscal policy are necessary to ensure that there is growth in the economy, that there is stability in the economy. Both are necessary. And fiscal policy and monetary policy have to act in coordination. Fiscal policy is typically done by the governments and monetary policy by the central banks. I don't know if you have a question later on about why there's a need for a central bank. Maybe we'll talk about that later on. So there is the government in Delhi, the central government, that does fiscal policy for the country. There are state governments in Andhra Pradesh, in Telangana, in Odisha, in Manipur, in Rajasthan, which do fiscal policy for the states. There is only one central bank for the country. There is no central bank for different states. There is only one central bank for the country, which is the Reserve Bank of India, which does monetary policy. I had the challenge of doing both of them, and both of them are equally challenging. You cannot say which is more difficult, because when you are in that hot seat, they are both difficult jobs. Fiscal policy, as I said, is about raising revenues, but you can't raise revenues because politicians are scared about raising revenues because people will not vote for them. So they cannot raise revenue. They cannot cut expenditure because they want to give freebies all the time. If, we saw the election in Andhra Pradesh recently, if the former chief minister said, I'll give you 3,000 rupees per month pension, the current chief minister said, I'll give you 4,000 rupees. So he promised more. Now, the difficulty of once you promise that, you cannot withdraw it. So the difficulty of meeting all the expenditure needs, and then there is, see, how do you meet your expenditure? Either from your earning or from borrowing, right? Earning for the state governments is limited. They cannot raise, they can, but they don't want to raise taxes. They can't cut down expenditure. Where do they get money from? They have to borrow. But if you borrow money, you have to repay. In principle, a loan has to repay for itself. Some of you might have taken student loan, right? If you take a student loan, the bank is giving you a loan on the understanding that you will get a degree from here, you will get a job, you will be able to repay it. You will be able to earn your living and be able to repay. Your loan repays itself. But if the government borrows money and spends it on giving away to people, where does the government get additional revenue to repay the loan? The debt burden will build up. That's what is happening in state governments and in the central government. That is the main fiscal problem of the country today. The main monetary policy problem is controlling inflation. There is if Professor Nikhil gives me 100 rupees, the 100 rupees has gone from his pocket, has come to my pocket. But the total money supply in the system has not gone up, right? It's the same. There is only one institution that can actually create money in the country. That is the Reserve Bank of India. Okay? The Reserve Bank of India can create money out of thin air. But just because they can create money, they cannot create money recklessly. They have to do it in a measured way to ensure that price stability is there, financial stability is there. And the way they create money is by calibrating the interest rate. You will learn about all that. It is not meant to be a classroom lecture. There are very experienced professors to teach you all that. But the challenge of the central bank, the challenge of monetary policy, is to calibrate the interest rates in the economy and to manage the liquidity, that is, create money supply, so that there is price stability, inflation. Inflation is low and stable.
Thank you, sir. Sir, so I think this conversation is getting very technical. I don't know how many of them are still with us.
Sorry if I'm getting technical, but
No, but
yeah.
the question was technical, so.
No, that's okay. But something, something will stay with you, monetary policy, fiscal policy, when they teach you 2 months down the line about all this. I'm sure that this will come into your mind.
So let's get to some lighter question. Actually, I was reading your book while at home. So I came across that paragraph about ambition,
Yeah.
where you talk about good ambition and bad ambition. So I was discussing it with my daughter. She said, what about people with no ambition? And a lot of youngsters don't know what to do. They do things because they are told this is right, and that then leads to lack of passion. So my question is, maybe you can talk about good and bad ambition, but first talk about what to do with this problem of no ambition.
As much as your daughter asked you that question, how old is she?
She is 18.
18. Yeah, I'm sure that she has an ambition. Okay, people, all of you have an ambition. So has Professor Nichols' daughter. Everybody has an ambition. I used to go when I was governor. I used to go to schools, and I used to travel on the road. If I see a school on the wayside, I will stop there. Typically, go to government schools and talk to children there. Aspirations of people have gone up. The other day I went to a function. One 15-year-old girl, it was a wedding function. She said, "Can I take a selfie with you?" So I said, "Okay, take a selfie." Then I said, "What do you want to be?" I thought she would say, "I want to be an IAS officer like you. I want to be a governor like you." She said, "I want to be an astronaut like Sunita Williams." Okay? So people's aspirations have gone up. When I go to schools and ask them, what do you want to be? They want to be like Indira Nui. They want to be like Geeta Gopinath. They want to be like Kalpana Chawla. They want to be like Shyamala Gopinath or Usha Thorat, who are deputy governors of the RBI. People's aspirations have gone up. That is a very good sign. Okay? And the problem is that our systems have to match up to that. You talked about ambition. How many of you read Julius Caesar? There is some quote about Caesar was ambitious, right? Something like that. Where that is shown as being ambitious was wrong, a wrong thing. Okay, being ambitious. It's the way you interpret ambition. My parents, when they brought me up, I was brought up like having ambition is a bad thing. Because having ambition is like, I want to own a big mansion. I want to be I want to have lots of riches, enjoy life. That used to be treated as ambition. That was against our values. But that's not the way I learned ambition afterwards. Ambition is a challenge you set for yourself, right? You are ambitious in the sense that you want to be the CEO of your company. You're ambitious in the sense that after you finish your education here, you want to start an enterprise. You want to become an entrepreneur. You are ambitious in the sense that you want to innovate something. These are all ambitions to have, and I think ambition is a very, very important thing. So ambition can be seen as a negative thing, like my parents saw it, and ambition can be seen as a positive thing. Okay? This is not a lighter vein answer that you wanted, but I just wanted, but hopefully not a technical answer, that having ambition is a good thing. That's what I write in my book.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, I have many more questions, but I think it's good to get to that side.
Sure.
And maybe see what questions they have to you. So, please take the mic that side, and students who have questions, please raise your hand. They'll bring the mic to you.
And from that other room also?
They can. They have a mic there.
So please mind that also. We'll go one boy, one girl, okay? Yeah.
Good morning, sir. I'm Varsha. It was an absolute delight hearing you speak today. Thank you for it. So anytime you step out into the country, it's hard to miss out on the development in terms of physical infrastructure or banking penetration. but it's also equally impossible not to miss out on the poverty that looms large, especially India hosting the largest number of poor today, and poverty which is multidimensional, poverty of opportunity in terms of the unemployment levels in the country today. Amongst the youth, again India hosting the largest number of youth in the world today. So having said those two aspects, my question to you is, how is that an ambitious goal of a $5 trillion economy relevant or even desirable to a common Indian who struggles to make the ends meet? Thank you.
Thank you, Varsha. I would think that having an ambition of getting to 5 trillion is both desirable and necessary. Okay, we should get to 5 trillion. Now I think about 3.9 trillion in current dollars, and we expect to be $5 trillion in 2027 or 2028. We want to grow fast. Growth is necessary but not sufficient. That's what you're referring to. You know, the public infrastructure that you referred to, all these roads and highways to the ports and the airports that are being built, private investment to the extent that is taking place, all that is necessary to get us to a $5 trillion economy. But that is necessary but not sufficient. You all learned in math, no? Something is necessary but not sufficient. Something is sufficient but not necessary. So, growing fast, getting to 5 trillion is necessary but not sufficient for alleviating poverty in the country. We need to accelerate the growth rate and ensure that the benefits of growth are widely shared, that prosperity is widely shared. When I was studying economics when I was 25, 30 years old, we were told that don't worry about the prosperity distribution and all that, you just concentrate on growth. Growth will automatically trickle down. If you see the old economics textbooks, you have actually a trickle-down theory, trickle-down growth, that you concentrate on growth, and growth will actually trickle down and ensure that everybody benefits from that, in the sense that a rising tide lifts all the boats. The last 50 years of development experience has taught us that trickle-down does not happen. It is possible, and indeed quite probable, that growth benefits the upper echelons of the economy, unless government takes explicit action to ensure that the benefits of growth trickle down. So, we need to accelerate the growth rate and ensure that the benefits are widely shared. That is the most important thing, growth with equity. What is to be done to ensure the second bit is a very difficult challenge. No? All of us, like I'm also a commentator these days, so I write articles in the newspapers saying that the government must generate employment opportunities. But if people challenge me and ask me, how do you generate employment? How do you ensure the small and marginal farmers, excuse me, that their lot improves? How do you ensure that women are benefited? How do you ensure that there is no malnutrition among children? How do you ensure that there is no gender parity? These are all various facets of the multidimensional poverty that you were talking about. There are no simple or single answers. But my concern or my disappointment is that the focus of the governments seems to be on growth, still hoping that distribution or equity will take care of itself. I believe that we should focus on jobs, on distribution, on equity.
Thank you, sir. Next question.
Hearty greetings, sir. So on behalf of all the students, I would like to convey warm greetings to you, sir. So my question comes
What is your name?
So my name is Samyak.
Samyak.
Yes. So my question.
Where are you from?
So I'm from Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh.
Very good, okay.
Yes, sir. So my question comes from the domain of geopolitics and geoeconomics. There are many prominent world leaders which are saying that we are heading towards multipolarity. And sir, I feel that that certainly means that there will be more conflicts around the world, and that will have economic implications. So you have had the experience of navigating through one of the most toughest times. So So what in your opinion do you think that how the scenario will be in next 5 years and how difficult it is to maintain the scenario? So that's question number one. And sir, does our economy has the ability to sustain a high growth for 7 to 8%, and how difficult would that be?
Thank you, Samyak. On the first question, what's that? The first
First
question?
question was multipolar world.
Yeah, on geopolitical tensions. Yeah, certainly true that geopolitical tensions are hurting countries all around the world and hurting emerging economies like India particularly. We saw that, for example, there is the Russia-Ukraine war. As a consequence, the price of petrol had gone up, and that hit our economy very badly. We saw geopolitical tensions in the sense of lockdown in China and the supply chain being cut. Okay? We saw geopolitical tensions by Trump tariffs, whereby free trade was curtailed. Free trade is necessary for global growth. Okay? So geopolitical tensions are adding an additional challenge for growth and stability in countries, including India. There is some smug satisfaction that India is now politically in a Goldilocks spot, and that India is very important both to both blocks, both to Russia and China on one side and the US on one side, so we can exploit that. But that, I believe, is short-sighted. If we take a medium-range view, I believe that geopolitical tensions hurt every country and hurt us, because we need the global economy to be one single unit without barriers for trade to improve, for cross-border movement of trade, finance, and people. That's a big challenge, and it hurts our growth prospects. On the second question about whether India can maintain 8% growth, 4 or 5 years ago, we used to say that we must replicate the China model of growth. China has clocked growth of double digits on a trot for over 3 decades. So we thought, for a long time, India, we thought we cannot grow that rapidly. People used to say that East Asia, you heard of the East Asian tigers, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Korea, they clocked very rapid growth, but they're small economies. That's okay for them, they can grow very fast, but large continental-sized economies like India and China cannot grow that fast. But China has disproved that notion by actually clocking growth in double digits for over 3 decades. So India thought that maybe we can replicate that too. But it's going to be a very, very difficult challenge for India. We cannot replicate the China model because China opened in 1980s. We are trying to open today in 2020s. The world in 2020 is a lot different from the world in 1980. China opened up when globalization was seen as a benign force. China manufactured and exported to the Western world. So China benefited from exporting, and US and European consumers benefited from cheaper prices. It was a win-win option. Globalization was seen as a benign force. China opened up when the global value chain was seen as the preferred mode of production. Today, the comparative advantage of the global value chain is eroding because of artificial intelligence and robotics, etc. And because of geopolitical tensions, there is opposition to trade and finance. So it'll be difficult for India to replicate the China model of success. But that does not mean that we cannot grow at 8 to 9% through other modes. China grew on manufacturing. Professor Raghuram Rajan and Rohit Lamba argued that India must go on the services route. Again, I can give you a 5-minute answer on why that is a possible, probable suggestion and why that is an implausible suggestion. Okay? That can be argued both ways. Yes, we must embark on a services-led growth, but that takes time. Whereas our, like Varsha asked, our unemployment problem is huge today. For services-led growth to create employment will take time. So on a long-term project, yes, services, but in the short term, we have to focus on manufacturing. So the long answer to your short question is, it's going to be a much more difficult challenge for India to clock 8 to 9% growth like China had done. It is difficult, but not impossible. We have to find our own innovative drivers of growth.
Thank you, sir. Any student in that room wishes to ask, please raise your hand. And the mic will come to you. Okay, I don't see anyone there. Yeah.
Hi sir, my name is Mohanad Khan from PGDM IT. So
What's your name?
Mohanad Khan sir. Mohanad Khan.
Mohanad Khan, where are you from?
Bombay.
Bombay, okay.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions. From the last 5 years, we are seeing bank collapsing or merging. Back in 2020, then Finance Minister said Yes Bank has been under scrutiny of RBI since 2017. According to some reports, loan book of Yes Bank has been even raised further after 2017. Kindly share your views. Why did RBI didn't interrupt when the Yes Bank loan book has been increasing? And seeing this, why the RBI has still not increased the deposit insurance for the public sector, sir? And my second question is, in your recent interview with the Hindu newspaper, you said state government must borrow at market rates and not subsidize one. So my question is, do you think it will affect our development and upgradation of government infrastructure, and more states will end up like Rajasthan and Punjab with debt to GDP ratio of approximately 40%? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ronald Khan. On the first question about the Yes Bank situation and why the RBI did not intervene sooner than it actually did, I cannot answer because, it's a very, very specific question. But what I want to say is that the RBI regulates banks. It keeps tab on the business models and the business trajectory of banks. The responsibility of the RBI as the regulator is to keep banks safe. All of you have bank accounts, right? And now you opened a bank account at a bank that is convenient to you. For example, if there is an ICICI branch here on the campus or a Canara Bank branch, you open a bank account there. You don't go around shopping for a bank. You don't say, oh, this bank is weak, it might collapse, I'll keep open an account there, I will keep my money there. That sort of a question does not arise in our mind, right? We open a bank account in a bank that is convenient to us. It's next to our house or next to our office, or it's on the way to my office, or my mother works there, therefore I open an account there. Why do you not worry about that? You don't worry about that because the RBI is worrying about that. It is the responsibility of the RBI to worry about bank safety and keep banks safe. But that does not mean that the RBI looks over the shoulders of banks and guides every decision. That cannot happen, right? Like for example, if your mother is helping you do homework when you were a child, but if your mother is doing the problem herself, where do you learn, right? So you have to become responsible for doing your homework. You cannot let your mother do it. Similarly, RBI has to be arm's length from the bank, cannot oversee every commercial decision of the bank. Drawing that delicate balance is the biggest challenge in regulation. Okay? And sometimes, you talked about Yes Bank because that came to a near collapse, but we don't see what they call the false hypothesis, I think. How many banks have not collapsed? Okay, how many banks have not collapsed because of RBI's responsible regulation? We don't see that. We see one Yes Bank and extrapolate from that. But I want you to understand that RBI would have prevented many, many bank collapses that you don't know. Okay, you don't know because it is unknowable. right? On your second question about borrowing at market rates, okay? That was my garbled interview in the Hindu yesterday. They didn't edit that properly. But that is the point, yes. I did say that governments must borrow at market rates. Why should you borrow at market rate? Suppose you're taking a student loan, the bank charges you 10% or something, and your father says, okay, I will bear half the percentage, half the interest cost. Okay? Then you become less responsible, right? You should earn enough to repay your student loan by yourself. If your father is subsidizing it, which means that if you need your father's subsidy to repay the loan, it means that the investment you're doing in your education is not sufficient to repay that loan. That's what it means, right? Okay? That's what a subsidy means. That should not be the case. So if the government is borrowing at a subsidized rate, you know why? How that happens? Okay, anyway, I will not go into technicalities, but the point is, if the market rate is 10%, the government is able to borrow at 7%. Who is paying that 3% cost? Who is paying that? Huh? All of us. The entire economy. Okay? The entire economy is paying that the cost of that subsidy. If you put a deposit of 10 lakhs in a bank, and if you're supposed to get 10% interest rate on that, you're only getting 8% today, that is because the bank is subsidizing the government. You don't know, because you don't see the link between the government borrowing at a subsidized rate and you getting a lower rate of interest on your deposit, or you paying a higher rate of interest on your student loan. But we're all, as economic agents in the country, we're all subsidizing the government. When there is a subsidy, people don't see the true cost. You make, I forget the exact economic term for that. Yeah, there is a distortion. It's a distortion in the economy. When you're getting a subsidized loan, you make distortionary decisions. Don't make economically optimal decisions. Okay? So if the government borrows at market rates and is able to repay, we are sure that the government is making optimal investments. If the government is borrowing at a subsidized rate, that introduces a distortion in the economy, which might be necessary sometimes, but not always. And there's a cost to that. That cost is being paid by all of us. We don't know.
Thank you, sir. So in the interest of time, we'll take one last question, and let's have Professor Vinay take that question.
So, you work with a lot of intelligent people throughout your career.
Including now.
Yeah.
400 intelligent people, yes.
So you were in the Monetary Policy Committee, really intelligent people across the table. You were in the Economic Advisory Council, brilliant people there. My limited experience has shown that arriving at a consensus in a room full of intellectuals is far more difficult than arriving at a consensus in a room full of idiots. So how did you, navigate that intellectual landscape that you had in the various rooms that you were part of throughout your career?
Yeah, thank you, Vinay, for that question. I cannot presume to claim that I have always managed a consensus. There are, highly intelligent people. I've had the pleasure and privilege of interacting with some very, very talented people in the country and around the world. Learned a lot from them. It is, you're right, that oftentimes it's easier to form a consensus among people who are less informed. I would not say less intelligent, but less informed, than among people who think they know. For example, if you're all taught monetary policy for 1 hour and you're given a case study on monetary policy, since your experience in monetary policy is limited, it's possible to arrive at a consensus much sooner than if you get together 400 top monetary policy experts in the country and ask them to reach a consensus. It's more difficult because they come from an enormous depth of experience, then they argue it out, etc. But I'm not always sure that the consensus formed by intellectuals is necessarily better than the consensus formed by relatively uninformed people. There is a book called The Wisdom of Crowds, right? Read that sometime. It's a good management book, The Wisdom of Crowds, how wisdom arises from people acting independently of each other, but that leads to wise decisions. For example, how does the stock market operate? The stock market derives the prices of equities, and millions of people they're not consulting each other, right? Millions of people are investing and disinvesting every day, but prices are discovered. And that is because of wisdom of crowds.
And Malcolm Gladwell is a wonderful author. He's written many such books.
Yes, yes.
And I think case in point is also few days back Monetary Policy Committee.
Yeah.
Two guys disagreed,
Dissented, yeah.
four agreed. So, so that part is there. Yeah.
But just another supplement to that question, in answer to Vinay, I'm always doubtful if there is consensus. Okay, you should have some recheck. If there's complete consensus in a group, you must recheck the consensus, because wisdom arises out of differences, and there's something called groupthink. Okay, so you can all succumb to groupthink and not think laterally. So consensus without discussion or debate is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, I think you gave a good example in your book on groupthink.
Groupthink, yeah.
Are you thinking like a group, or are you thinking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
No, it says that it's by a Mexican woman who said, "I want you to think, but I don't want you to think like me." Okay. So I want you to think, but not think like me. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So we come to the close, and we would ask our director to present you with the vote of